The history of Buddhism is the story of a great quest of mankind. A quest to leave behind the desires and attachments of the material world. A quest to attain the peace which can only be found within. It was the 2nd century BC. In the Western Ghats, close to the coast of Maharashtra, one of the greatest chapters in Buddhist art was unfolding. Over a period of 1,000 years, more than 1,200 caves were hewn out of the heart of the rock. Most of these were Buddhist. Leaving behind the cares and confusions of the material world, the devotee came to these havens of peace to meditate. Homes and even palaces of kings were being made out of ephemeral materials like wood. Only that which was made in service to the eternal was carved out of everlasting rock. The first phase of prolific excavation was from the 2nd century BC till the 3rd century AD. Great Buddhist prayer halls and viharas for the residence of monks were made in the rule of the Satvahans and the Kshatrapas. Though these kings revered Hindu deities, they patronized all religious establishments. Individual sculptures and pillars were donated by merchants, bankers, gardeners, farmers, fishermen, housewives and others, including many Yavanas or Greeks. These cave sanctuaries were made on the caravan routes which came from central India to the ports on the coast of Maharashtra. Perhaps it was prosperity on account of flourishing trade which made possible this era of great rock-cut caves. Trade networks, both internal and with the Mediterranean, were expanding fast in this period. In 77 BC, Pliny the Elder writes in Rome that Roman coffers were being emptied for buying too many fine textiles from India. There are 22 rock-cut caves at Bhaja, facing the valley of the river Indrayani in Pune district. The Chaitya Griha or prayer hall here was made in the 2nd century BC. Chaitya means an object of worship. The stupa deep inside continues as the focus of devotion. The mortal relics of the Buddha had been enshrined in a number of stupas. For Buddhists, the stupa became the symbol of his passage from the world of illusion and pain to that of eternal bliss. A horseshoe-shaped arch dominates the facade of the cave. The shape was first made in imitation of wooden architecture in the Barabar caves of the Ajivikas in Bihar. Soon, it was to be a pan-Indian motif in Buddhist, Jaina and Hindu monuments. The scale of the hall is impressive. It is 55 feet by 26 feet and rises to a height of 29 feet. Pillars which run along the walls of the cave provide a circumambulatory passage around the stupa. The pillars lean inwards in imitation of wooden architecture. Above, wooden ribs have actually been added to copy the appearance of freestanding buildings. Among the viharas here, cave number 18, which is contemporary to the Grand Chaitya Hall, is remarkable. On the right wall of the veranda are sculptural representations identified as Hindu deities. One shows a royal figure driving a chariot through the skies. This may be the earliest surviving depiction of Surya, the sun, who vanquishes the demon of darkness. The panel on the right has been identified as the earliest known depiction of Lord Indra, who rides an elephant. Indra is revered in Hindu and Buddhist temples till today. In a secluded gorge of spectacular natural beauty, about 50 kilometers northwest of Aurangabad, are the caves of Pithalkhora. Part of the hill face has disintegrated and the fronts of the caves have been lost. However, what remains shows that the caves 3 and 4 here may have been the crowning glory of Buddhist art when they were made in the late 2nd century BC. Paintings of the 6th and 7th centuries AD in the Chaitya Hall Cave 3 show that the cave remained in use for at least 800 years. The conception of the entrance of Cave 4 is grand. It is as if the weight of the cave rests on the backs of life-sized elephants which have been made in the plinth. This concept continued in Indic monuments through the ancient and medieval periods. Above the entrance of Cave 4 was made Lakshmi, embodying abundance. She is depicted often on the railings and gateways of the contemporaneous stupas at Bharhut and Sanchi. Gajalakshmi, when she is lustrated by elephants, is one of the earliest formalized deities in Indic art and is seen in the monuments of all faiths. At Badsa, on the south face of the range of hills which have the Bhaja caves, is another magnificent site of excavations. The grand Chaitya Griha is partly hidden from the profane world outside by a large section of rock which has been left uncut. In the ancient tradition, that which is important was always kept away from the glare of common sight. We have to make an effort to gain the joy and peace to be found inside. The magnificent Chaitya Griha was made in the 1st century AD. The pillars inside are the earliest seen pillars rising out of Purna Ghatas or vases of plenty. From this period, this becomes a common motif of Buddhist and Jaina art. On the pillar capitals, we see animals with riders, as are seen in the contemporaneous Sanchi Stupa gateways in central India. The interior of the cave, dimly lit by the jali window in the front, is simple. Leaving behind the profusion of images and sculptures, the heart of the mountain contains the stupa. The pillars around it and in the hall are plain. The devotee has travelled from the world of illusory shapes outside to be closer to the truth in all its simplicity. A small group of caves was excavated in the 1st century BC, overlooking the stream of Ulhas at Kondane near Karjat. Owing to the remoteness of the site, it seldom receives the attention which it deserves. Despite its ruined state, the magnificent facade of the Chaitya Griha exhilarates the visitor. The figures made here are delicately modelled and are graceful. There is a sense of natural ease in the artistic depictions of these times. The men and women express emotions with freedom and warmth, not often seen in later representations. At Carli, on a high hill opposite the range which has the caves of Bhaja, a grand Chaitya Griha and Viharas were created in the 1st and 2nd centuries AD. Here is the largest of all Chaitya Grihas to be carved out of the living rock. One of its inscriptions proclaims that it is the most excellent rock mansion in all of India. Another inscription records the gift of the Hindu devotee Ushavadata, son-in-law of King Nahapana. He donated the revenue of a village to support the monks at Carli. One must remember that these Chaitya Grihas were not really architecture but sculpture on an epic scale. One can imagine how vast the task must have been to create such rock-cut shrines. Great care and planning would have been required at every stage of the enterprise. The cutting of the rock began from top to bottom, creating the spaces and leaving stone for pillars to be shaped later. Even as the stone was hewn to create the structures, the finishing of the walls and the carving of detailed sculpture was taken up. As at Badsa, the facade of the cave is mainly hidden from the mundane world by a rock-cut screen. A recent shrine today further blocks the view. On the side walls of the veranda are made large elephants. They appear to effortlessly support the many-storied structures carved above them. The facade has on it 6 couples larger than life and filled with robust vitality. These are the yakshas and yakshis who embody abundance and fertility of nature, the forces that ensure the continuance of life. They were seen individually in the gateways of the stupas of Bharhut and Sanchi. Here they have come together as mithunas or loving couples. Their closeness to each other in natural affection symbolizes the completeness of the world, the harmony of the natural order. The figures do not attempt to faithfully copy the human body. They are idealized forms presenting the symbolic essence of human life at its most vital. They graphically display the quality of prana or inner breath of Indian art. The grand hall is 124 feet by 46 feet and rises to a height of 45 feet. There are 37 pillars which run the length of the caves and around the stupa. The capitals have seated animals carrying human figures, usually a couple and sometimes 2 women. They are seated in a friendly embrace and display a rare warmth. Here are people as they were meant to be, uninhibited, easy and joyous. Inscriptions record the names of numerous individual donors who paid for the carvings of various parts of the cave and its pillars. These include Greeks. There are many small rock-cut caves on 4 hills close to Junnar in Pune district. These were excavated from the 1st century BC to the 3rd century AD. There are several viharas here, of which the largest is on Suleiman Hill. To the vihara's proper left is a Chaitya Griha with an inscription of the 2nd century AD. Within the Borivali National Park in Mumbai is the cave site of Kanheri. This site provides a view of developments in Buddhist art over a period of 1,000 years. The caves at Kanheri provide the last expressions of the early rock-cut tradition of Western India. Simultaneously, this site also heralds the iconography of Buddhist art of the later period. The Chaitya Griha Cave 3 was excavated in the reign of King Satkarni in the 2nd century AD. It has a courtyard with a rock-cut fence around it. As at Carli, it has 2 pillars in front. One pillar has a representation of the Buddha, the earliest one in Western India. The style of the figures here has similarities with the contemporaneous sculpture of the Mathura region of North India. The men and the women have a sense of the breath and the movement of life. They display individual postures and have gentle expressions. About 100 kilometers from Aurangabad, in a horseshoe-shaped gorge of the Vaghora river, are 31 rock-cut caves at the magnificent site of Ajanta. The caves were excavated in 2 phases, one around the 2nd century BC and the second around the 5th and 6th centuries AD. Cave 10 is the earliest Chaitya Griha here and was made in the 2nd century BC. The murals here are thrilling to see, as they are the earliest surviving paintings of the historic period in India. These murals are known to be the fountainhead of all the classic paintings of Asia. There are also paintings in this cave which were made about 800 years later. Cave 9 is a Chaitya Griha of the 1st century. The facade has figures of the Buddha which were added in the later period. The Shunga and the Satvahan periods were an era of the prolific making of monuments. Here were formulated the themes and traditions of art which continued in later centuries. The railings of stupas and the exteriors of caves presented images of the world as seen around us. Deep within the heart of the mountain, we were to contemplate that which was eternal, that which was within. The stupa was simplicity itself. In the silence of the interior, it was a symbolic representation of the escape from the illusions of the material world. From the 1st century onwards, deities were created in Indian art for meditation and adoration, puja. The belief was in the oneness of all that there is. The forms of the world around us were considered maya, illusions. Still, the deities provided familiar shapes which the mind could grasp. By the 5th century, sublime deities were made in northern and central India. Though these were in human form, their purpose was to move us through their beauty and grace to transcend the world of forms, to leave behind our attachments and desires. Around the 2nd century BC, at the magnificent site of Ajanta, great Buddhist caves had been carved out of the heart of the mountain. In the mid-5th century, under the rule of the Hindu Vakataka kings, the site saw renewed activity. As in the Indic tradition seen earlier, feudatories of the king, ministers and even queens freely followed the Buddhist faith and patronized Buddhist caves and art. There were no religious divisions, and the patrons of the Buddhist caves sometimes proclaimed their descent from Hindu deities. The facades of the early Chaitya Grihas presented a grand simplicity. The second phase of Ajanta brings us a changed world. Cave 19 of the mid-5th century is the first Chaitya Griha or hall of meditation of the Vakataka period. The facade of the hall is thickly populated with divine forms. The horseshoe-shaped window above the entrance, based upon wooden architectural models, has become more elaborate. On either side of the window are made attendant figures. They stand in graceful postures and the treatment is delicate. Buddhas are made flanking the entrance to the cave. The figures have a humanity and sensitivity which gives Ajanta a special place in Indian art. There is a grace and an inward look which is the hallmark of the sculpture of this period. The garments are diaphanous. A Nagaraja and a Nagini with an attendant figure are among the finest sculptures of Ajanta. Earlier, the interior of the hall of meditation was simple and unadorned. The focus was on the final truth, which was formless. Now it is the beauty of form which serves to reveal the grace which underlies creation. Peace is now created by beauty and harmony around us. Though the stupa continues to be made, it is very considerably elaborated. Now the Buddha is made in front of the stupa to bestow his blessing upon the worshipper. Cave 26 is a grand Chaitya Griha, perhaps the last excavation at Ajanta. It is much larger and more elaborate than Cave 19. The Buddha inside is made within a stupa and sits with pendant legs upon a throne. The Maitreya Buddha, who is as yet to come in the world, is often made in this fashion. The circumambulatory path around the shrine is elaborately carved. On the left wall of the cave is a marvelous depiction of the Buddha's victory over the armies of Mara. These forces represent the turbulence and confusion of the mind. Mara's daughters below represent our desires that keep us bound to a life of pain in the material world. The Buddha is serene as he rises above all these and is ready for enlightenment. A profoundly moving scene is that of the Mahaparinirvana of the Buddha, when he finally achieves release from the mortal world. This is one of the grandest yet most sensitive depictions in all of Buddhist art. The figure of the reclining Buddha is about 22 feet long and is best seen from near his feet, the appropriate position for the devotee. The perspective has been perfectly made for viewing from this spot. Ananda, his grieving disciple, also sits at his feet, desolate at the loss, forlorn. In the solemnity and grandeur of the noble achievement of the Mahaparinirvana, Ananda adds a human touch which is unforgettable. The same sentiment is echoed in some of the seated figures of monks below the Buddha. Above, heavenly musicians celebrate the great moment of the Buddha's release from the world of illusions. A number of grand viharas for the residence of monks were excavated in this period. These are considerably larger than the earlier viharas and are profusely painted. In fact, practically every inch of wall and ceiling space was originally covered with fine paintings. Early literature has many references to such halls of murals, and these at Ajanta are extremely valuable as they are the only surviving significant body of such paintings. These exquisite murals are among the greatest treasures of the entire heritage of Indian art. The growing complexity of iconography is seen in the caves of Ajanta of this period. Besides the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, in the upper floor of Cave 6, the shrine also has 6 Manushi Buddhas who preceded Gautama Buddha. While the hammer and chisel sounded in the gorge of Ajanta, work was also taken up again at the Buddhist site of Kanheri within present-day Mumbai. Here in the 5th and 6th centuries, older caves were modified and new excavations were made. This made Kanheri the largest rock-cut site in India, with over 100 caves. On either side of the veranda of the early Cave 3 were made colossal Buddhas over 22 feet high. This is the beginning of the tradition of Brihad or colossal Buddhas which spread near and far. They display the gesture of the bestowing of grace. Vidyadharas bring garlands to them. By the 4th century, yoga or yoga tantra was well established in Indic thought. It was a graded path of evolution through discipline and meditation. In the Buddhist faith, Kanheri Cave 90 presents the earliest surviving mandala which presents such a graded path. In Cave 41 of the late 5th or early 6th century is the first known depiction of the Bodhisattva Alokiteshvara with 11 heads. At Aurangabad, not very far from Ajanta, another group of caves were excavated in the 6th century. The earlier caves here are contemporaneous with Ajanta and seem to continue the sculptural traditions of that site. In the later caves here, sculptural panels are increasingly used to carry the iconographic message. A litany of Avalokiteshvara and panels of other bodhisattvas are made. There is also a panel of Tara with attendants. These are early depictions of the increasing numbers of deities which were being created in the Yogacharya development of Mahayana Buddhism. The worshipper meditated upon the aspects of the Buddha which were personified in these deities. The site of Ellora, on the outskirts of the city of Aurangabad, witnessed the grand culmination of more than 1,000 years of the rock-cutting tradition. From the 6th century AD till the 10th, the last caves to be made in the Buddhist, Hindu and Jaina tradition were created here. 35 caves were cut out of the western face of an outcrop of the Sahyadri hills. The caves of the three faiths were made in overlapping periods. As everywhere in ancient India, this demonstrates the generous attitude of the rulers towards the worship of all divinities. The Buddhist caves at Ellora were made in the 7th century. These are the largest Buddhist excavations to be carried out in India. They also reflect developments in iconography which had been taking place. From the simple ethical messages of the original teachings, the doctrine had become much more complex. The qualities required for enlightenment had been studied in great detail, and these had been personified in a large number of deities. A graded path towards the truth had been evolved through deities who personified the attributes of wisdom and compassion of the Buddha. The last Buddhist Chaitya Griha with a stupa to be excavated is Cave 10 at Ellora. The stupa has all but disappeared behind the figure of the Buddha, which has become much larger than it was at Ajanta in the 5th century. The traditional large window of the Chaitya hall has also undergone considerable change. It has lost its large size and grand simplicity to become smaller and more decorative. Meditation and worship was now conducted in the vast interior of the Buddhist viharas. The caves are larger and more elaborate than were made before. Cave 12 has 3 vast stories, each larger than any Buddhist excavation at the earlier caves of Ajanta. The rock-cut caves of India are one of the most magnificent traditions of the art of the world. In the Western Deccan, for 1,200 years, great caves were hewn out of the mountain. These took us far from the clamor and anxieties of the material world outside. The devotee could come here and meditate. The aim was to come out of oneself with the realization of the grace which is in all of creation. The journey of Buddhist art has brought us to a point where the human form is used to convey ideas that transcend our mortal existence. The subject of the art is the depiction of the essence and not only the optical reality of the world. As stated in the ancient treatise, the Chitra Sutra, the depiction of harmony and beauty has a transforming influence upon the viewer. When we respond to beauty, in that moment we come out of ourselves. Our daily cares and concerns are left behind. In that moment, we are absorbed in the grace which is in all of creation. The state of Andhra Pradesh in the Deccan Plateau in India is a land of a rich and ancient culture. It has flourishing traditions of literature, music and the arts coming from early times. This is the fertile valley of the Krishna River in Andhra Pradesh. Since ancient times, the bounty of cotton here attracted traders from all parts of the world. There were colonies of Romans who lived in this region. In fact, vast numbers of Roman coins have been found here. In the 1st and 2nd centuries AD, practically every hilltop in this region would have had a wonderful stupa on it. Even today, there are more than 140 major Buddhist sites listed here. In a secluded valley in Guntupalli, there is a group of rock-cut caves. These are among the earliest of the entire Buddhist tradition. In fact, a cave here has a facade which is quite like the 3rd century BC caves in Bihar. The region of the Krishna River became one of the greatest centers of Buddhism in the world. Indeed, this river valley became a valley of hundreds of stupas. The many stupas here were all covered with shimmering limestone slabs with exquisite carvings on them. The ancient art of the Deccan is infused with a unique gentleness. It is an art which takes our attention constantly to the peace within. It is an art full of compassion, whose very lines bespeak the gentleness of the soul. Jagyapeta, on a tributary of the Krishna River, had many stupas. Buddhism flourished here for 500 years, up to the 4th century AD. Worship at some of the stupas continued till the 14th century. The caves and stupas of this valley reflect developments of Buddhism and its art over several hundreds of years. We also see the happy coexistence of different schools of Buddhist thought. Stupas of the Theravada tradition are made side by side with Chaityas and Buddhas of the Mahayana tradition. The sites of Guma Diduru, Ghantashala, Goli, Bhatti Prolu, Gudivada, Ramatirtham and Sali Hundam are among the numerous that reflect the rich Buddhist history of Andhra Pradesh. At early sites of this region, sculptures are still being found. The Krishna Valley must have been an enchanted place with its hundreds of stupas and with numberless sculpted images made with hands of devotion. Here in Panigiri village in the Nalagonda district, fine sculptures are still being found under the ground till today. These sculptures present a world of gentleness which awakens the best within us. The ancient Indian treatise on art making, the Chitra Sutra, states that it is the purpose of art to reveal this grace which underlies all that there is. "2,000 years ago, Dharani Kota was the capital of the Satvahan kings. It was from this glorious place that the textiles of this cotton used to go to places like Rome. A great civilization developed here. The Buddhist site of Amaravati is on the bank of the river Krishna, next to the ancient capital of Dharani Kota. The history of the stupas at this site covers at least 1,400 years, from the time of Emperor Ashoka in the 3rd century BC. By the 1st century BC, the stupa at Amravati was enlarged and sculpted limestone slabs with narrative sculptures were added. A drum slab of the stupa shows the Buddha's enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. The footsteps and the parasols indicate the Buddha's presence. In the 2nd century AD, the Satvahans extended their rule to the Eastern Deccan. Under them, the sculptural relief of the magnificent stupa reached its culminating phase. The entire stupa was covered with limestone slabs with exquisite sculpture. An ornate stone Vedika or railing was also added. Today, only a mound remains of the Mahastupa or Great Stupa as it was called. In its time, its glory was known throughout the Buddhist world. Fortunately, we have an idea of what the stupa looked like from depictions of it in the sculptural reliefs. The Mahastupa was 162 feet in diameter. The railings were made 15 feet away. The railings were richly sculpted. On the inner surface of the pillars were made narrative carvings of the life of the Buddha. A pillar narrative depicts the great departure, when Prince Siddhartha rode out of his palace to renounce his worldly life. The coping of the railing is fully adorned with eternal themes. Often a thick and luxuriant garland is depicted. It is reminiscent of the vine of the fullness and bounty of nature which was seen in Buddhist sites from the 2nd century BC onwards. It is carried by turbaned youths who would represent the urban city dwellers of the prosperous Krishna Valley. On entering the hallowed enclosure, the worshipper saw exquisite carvings on both sides of him. A world of Buddhist narratives was created through which he moved as he went around the holy stupa. Sculpted scenes such as the birth of the Buddha would transport the viewer far from the everyday concerns of the mundane world. His soul would be lifted in response to the beauty and grace before him. The relief of the 2nd century at Amravati is deeply cut, which gives it the appearance of being fully in the round. The depth of the cutting permits the overlapping of figures on 2 and even 3 planes. Each figure is individual and possessed of life and movement of his own. The variety of poses is infinite. Besides the Buddha figure in the reliefs, a number of freestanding Buddhas have also been found at Amravati and other sites of the Andhra region. They date from the 3rd century AD onwards. These are quite different from the Buddha figures that were being made at Mathura and Gandhara and show an independent artistic conception. These were to be the models for the Buddhas of Southeast Asia. In the 3rd century AD, the power of the Satvahans began to fade. However, the tradition of art which had blossomed under them continued. The Ikshvakus came to power in the 2nd quarter of the 3rd century and established a new capital called Vijayapur, or the city of victory, in the Nagarjuna-Konda valley. One of the greatest Buddhist teachers, Nagarjuna, lived here in the 1st or 2nd century AD. Nagarjuna-Konda means the hill of Nagarjuna. The area continued as a most important center for the development of Buddhist philosophy under the Ikshvakus. A large number of monastic establishments was founded here for the residence, study and worship of at least 4 different sects of Buddhists. Unlike Amravati, the remains at Nagarjunakonda have been systematically excavated and securely dated through inscriptions to the 3rd and 4th centuries. The original site was submerged by the making of a dam in recent years. However, the edifices were carefully reconstructed and preserved for the future. The style of the sculpture here is very similar to the last phase at Amravati. The figures are lively and full of movement. They are cut deep into the stone. The tradition of the depiction of the stupa is continued here on sculptural slabs on the monument. The many finely made depictions here include the scene of the birth of the Buddha. Queen Maya, the mother of the Buddha, gave birth to him while standing under a sal tree. The great departure of Prince Siddhartha when he leaves the palace of his father and his princely life is depicted. Divine beings hold up the hooves of his horse Kantaka so that he may ride out of the palace silently. The creative force of nature is expressed in yakshis whose mere touch causes the trees to blossom. These continue as a favorite theme from the earliest Buddhist stupa railings of the BC period. What is most remarkable is that it was not just the royal families who were patronizing the making of temples and stupas. There are thousands of inscriptions right across India, which show that it was fishermen, farmers, housewives, monks and nuns who patronized the making of the temples and stupas, their railings and their sculptures. It was actually the common people who created the vast Buddhist heritage of ancient India. The ultimate belief was in the oneness of the whole of creation. The sculptures were made, as donation inscriptions state, for the benefit of all beings of the world. The artist presents before us the grace which underlies all that is around us. The grace which is also deep within each of us, and we respond to it when it is presented before us in art. The Krishna Valley of present-day Andhra Pradesh has a unique and rich Buddhist heritage dating from the 3rd century BC onwards. This region was one of the main areas of the development of Buddhist philosophy and art, not just for India but also for the rest of Asia. The Deccan Plateau in India is one of the oldest centers of civilization in the ancient world. Perhaps it was the black cotton soil across this region which led to these developments. Across India, food grew in plenty in the fertile soil well watered by many rivers. Abundant cotton in the Deccan led to the making of the finest textiles, which drew merchants from across the globe. Indic philosophy and art blossomed in the atmosphere of peace and plenty which prevailed. The Deccan is one of the greatest lands of the development of Buddhism, of the early Theravada kind and also of the later Mahayana and Vajrayana orders. The art of both the Western and Eastern Deccan reflects the gentlest and noblest thoughts ever in the minds of humankind. One can only wonder how fine and compassionate were the people whose hands could create such dignity and gentle expressions.